Welcome to Agents in Production, what enterprise identity governance looks like now. Before we get started, I'd love to give some context around C1, formerly known as Conductor 1. If you haven't noticed our recent name change, we are now C1. We are building the access and governance identity layer for the agentic enterprise. We give our customers one platform for every identity so they can govern with confidence and secure AI adoption all at speed. Awesome. Well, that's enough about us. Here's the setup for what we want to talk about today. So, a year ago, AI agents were on roadmaps, but according to our research, 95% of organizations that planned to deploy AI agents a year ago have already done it. And so that production happened fast, and most times governance wasn't able to keep up. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. Not theory, not a product demo. We're going to dig into where the real gaps are, what we're hearing from our own CISOs, and what we're seeing in conversations with our customers. So I have two people who are exactly right for this conversation. Welcome, Kevin. Welcome, Will. I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourselves. Kevin, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Kevin Paige. I'm the field CISO here at C1. I've been with C1 just over a year now at this point. And prior to that, I've got over 30 years in cybersecurity. And kind of last two roles before here was the CISO at MuleSoft and CISO at Flexport. And now I'm here ready to talk about identity and talk a lot about AI. But that's me. Well,
Everyone, Will Bengtson. I'm the CISO here at Conductor One. I've been here just 3.5 months now, I think. Time's flying. Previously here, before years at HashiCorp, Corp, Capital One, Netflix, a couple other places, but like Kevin, spend a lot of time in the field, specifically software and security. Super excited to be talking about AI, and I keep wanting to think about how I could play like the original Will I Am to be like the original Will AI Am or something. But I haven't figured that one quite out yet. But maybe by the end of this, we'll figure it out.
I mean, Will, I'm so into AI. I got AI in my last name.
All right. Well, I'm also going to hold you to that by the end of this. I want to hear how your name is working out.
All right, love it.
I do love that though, Will. You gotta figure that out. I love it.
All right, before we have a lot of data that I want to ask you both about today, but before we get into that, I do just want to start with kind of an overall question, what you're seeing on the day to day. So, Kevin, Will, what's the biggest change that you've seen in identity governance in the past 6 months? I know that's a pretty big general question, so give it your best. Kevin, I'll pass it to you first.
Sure. I think especially I guess because I've been at C1 Conductor One for over a year at this point. I started kind of before, you know, all the we spoke so much about AI and identity. So I think that the biggest probably evolution I've seen is that this discussion about identity governance isn't just about people anymore, right? So I think 6 months ago, and I'm talking to CISOs and security leaders, we're talking about access reviews, lifecycle management, and then the big discussion was zero standing permissions, right? What's the difference between least privilege and zero standing permissions? All very human centric problems. I mean, those haven't gone away. But I think what's fundamentally changing especially this last 6 months is the fastest growing identity class in the enterprise is now non-human, and specifically AI agents, just because they operate so differently. I think we're going to talk a lot about our future of identity report, but I like to go look at other vendors' numbers, and I like to look at like Gartner's numbers and other numbers out there, and you see lots of trends. Like you'll see our future of identity report, very interesting. We ask some very cool specific questions. But if you look at other companies' numbers, I think I've looked at SailPoints and CyberArk and a couple others that really talk about very similar things, and that's applying privilege management controls to agents as opposed to humans is getting harder and harder to do. And I think that this idea between the difference between humans and AI agents isn't just like a tiny little shift from a scale perspective. I think it's a categorical change, and really an evolution in how we need to think about dealing with identity, where we need to come up with this idea. We need to converge. If we start looking at AI agents, we have to worry about service accounts, API keys, human identities. So there's this convergence process that needs to happen in order to do this correctly. And we're really starting to talk about converging how to handle all of these together, right? So historically, we went from governing a known set of human identities with predictable behavior. And you worked at a company for, years and years and years, and maybe swap jobs, but very compliance driven, from a governance perspective. And now everything's shifting more, to a very security state of mind, on why we're doing things and how we're doing it, and really being able to control all the identities, right? So it's very interesting, I think, where we're at, and that's kind of, I guess, a long-winded way to just really kind of think about so much has changed in the last 6 months. Like, it's hard to, like, pick one thing, but I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think. Well,
Yeah, I think, ditto to a lot of what you said, Kevin. Obviously, for me, being in the role now for 3.5 months, the conversations are happening, which is different for me than 6 months ago. And I was, pounding the identity champion, drum internal to HashiCorp and IBM. So I'm having tons of conversations with customers internally and figuring out, what is the right path, both for C1 as well as for everyone else. And I love that it's different for everyone, but there's some commonalities across the board there. And I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is uh, that probably if I was in these conversations more last year is folks are realizing that it's happening whether they're ready or not. Folks are adopting AI, they're building agents, and they're paving their own path. Be it, is the business enabling them, or are they being scrappy and figuring out how to do it themselves? And so I think it's people are really getting serious about now's the time to think about it if they haven't already been thinking about it. And most importantly, you know, have to move semi fast in order to really, I would say, catch up, but most importantly, keep up. It's been amazing how quick we've been moving as a company from my time joining to even just some of the product launches that we've been able to do. And I can't wait to see what's in store for the rest of the year. And next year's identity report's going to be amazing. It's going to be really cool to kind of think about kind of how perceptions have changed and how people have really embraced AI agents, identity, morphed their traditional human approach to really embrace the agentic approach. Kevin, that you built tons of teams as well. I think about product pitches 2-3 years ago that were using AI to do triage and things, and thinking about, yeah, this is never going to work. To now thinking about building out orgs here to, okay, where do agents fit? How do we leverage them well alongside everyone else? And so, yeah, I'd say the biggest thing for me is conversations are happening and people are taking it serious, which I'd love to see.
Definitely. It is really exciting to think about where we're gonna be in just 6 months or a year from now. So that's actually a perfect setup for where I do wanna spend the bulk of our time today because the data really backs up into exactly what you're describing. So going back to our Future of Identity research report, we found that 41% of organizations are still relying on total standing permissions for access management, and only just under 20% are using continuous policy based enforcement. And that becomes a real problem, of course, when you layer in agents. These aren't humans logging in once a day. They're making, hundreds of decisions, accessing certain systems, taking actions. So, Will, I'll throw this one to you first. One thing we keep hearing from customers is there's a lot of ambiguity. It's unclear who really owns the identity lifecycle for AI agents. There's maybe not an assigned owner, or there's not a deprovisioning path. Credentials are persisting after the task is done. Why is this so hard to solve?
Well, I think it's hard to solve because one, it's new. People are trying to figure it out. Two, I don't think everyone's aligned quite yet. In some organizations, it might be the CISO's responsibility. In some other organizations, it might be the CIO. In other organizations, it might be VP of Eng that are kind of leading the charge here. And as you see the various different identities being minted, or the different privileges standing, and as I think about, I'm going to build the thing. Maybe it's too hard to go get another service account or identity. So I just go ahead and bootstrap it with my permissions, not realizing that, oh, got standing admin and maybe that's not a good thing. I think also, even if you had a good path on how to solve ownership of identity or service accounts internally, there's still the path that downstream systems that you're connecting to or using don't have a really good way to manage permissions more fine grain or make it easier for you to do just in time and things like that. And so I think it's just, it's a hard problem that folks now, once again, kind of to my comment earlier, the conversations are happening. People are starting to think about it, starting to take it more seriously, and so I think we're going to start finding that ownership is becoming more clear at different organizations. But I think it'll definitely vary depending on you know what what industry you're in, the size, kind of where you are in your journey of adoption as well. But I mean, setting permission is just hard. It's kind of yeah, it, it's it's like you have all the freedom to do all the things that you want, and then all of a sudden they're going to come start taking things away. It's very difficult. You get organizations and the employees start rebelling, not really rebelling, but it's frustrating. It's very frictionful. And so it's much easier if you were to start a company today and start it from the beginning, rolling it out small. But once trying to pull things back, it's definitely it takes the wind out of the sails, and I think that's probably what folks are most worried about. Like really refining that is how's it going to impact our ability to deliver and move fast.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think there's a real tension there, like, on one side, you want fine-grained control over what every agent can do, and then on the other side, you don't wanna drown people in approval fatigue. Um, Kevin, how do you balance that?
Um, well, I mean, I think that you said 41%, right? That was the number that you quoted?
Yeah, for standing permissions for access management.
Yeah, I mean, 41%, I mean, that just sounds super generous. Like, I don't see 41% out there. I mean, I mean, we must be like working with very mature organizations if 41% is the metric. I mean, what I see in practice is that similar to what Will was saying, organizations know they should be moving to a mechanism that provides continuous enforcement. But the operational cost of getting there is hard, right? And why is it hard? Because we're ripping out the way Access has worked for years and years and years and years. Plus, there's all kinds of tools and technologies. Right, every standing permission has a person who put it there. A workflow depends on it. Probably a ticket, hopefully, that approved it, or somebody just did it one time and it was supposed to have been removed a long time ago. And nobody wants to go back and fix it because there's new problems to deal with. You don't want to deal with those old problems. And I think that the 19% continuous enforcement number is, I think that's just too low, right? I think, you know, 80 that means 81% of organizations are making, how is 81% of organizations making a decision? Is it based on other people in the org, what permissions they have, or what permissions they had a year ago, right? And we know that never works good because everybody wants to have the same permission that the guy who's worked there for 15 years has, which is root level and admin access to everything. So we need to figure out, how to deal with this, right? We need to figure out, continuous signals, behavior, context, risk, right? And, start moving to a world where agents are making autonomous decisions 24/7, and you've got the systems in place to be able to deal with that type of capability. But yeah, clearly this is more of a uh, legacy tools, organizational process issues, and it's just a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and that tracks with what we're seeing. So in our report, we found that 64% of organizations say their agents already act autonomously, within policies or with only post-action review. But then at the same time, like over a quarter are saying their existing identity tools weren't designed for agents at all. So Kevin, you alluded to this, but Will, I'd love to follow up. Like, how do you even think about scoping agent identity? Like, do our agents inheriting human position permissions? Do they ever need to inherit admin level access? How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting problem. I think the easiest path, and I think it's the path that everyone's starting with, is like, oh, let me just give it my permissions and get it running. And I spent a lot of time doing cloud security at Netflix, and we were trying to combat something similar with like, how do you finally scope an application's role for having just the permission it needs, right? And we kind of did something similar where we overly subscribe permissions to the new application and then come back later and pull off the things that it wasn't actually using, and that works seemingly well. But I think here in the agentic world, it's a little different, right? Especially if you're running full autonomous, you got agents that are going to make decisions on their own, and hopefully it's the right ones. You got the guardrails in place. Um, you know, I think ideally you'd be able to look and see at the task at hand and what this agent's going to do. Is either going to triage security at inbox or something like that, and then from there just kind of prescribe the permissions. But I think once again we're unfortunately going to fall into the trap of the downstream system that this agent needs access to doesn't have the ability to scope the role more fine grained, and so we're going to have to risk accept the fact that it's going to have permissions that it doesn't really need, but in order to do it, or in order to do this one silly task, I actually have to give it some sort of admin to be able to do. And so I actually think the problem is probably going to be more difficult than anyone thinks, because even if I could enumerate the specific actions an agent's going to do that I can, and each time I give it a task, the downstream systems likely are not going to have the robust RBAC granularity that you would need in order to like truly have fine scoped. And I think the comment of like, oh, we'll just do a post action review, that's all great until it's really handling a huge amount of workload, and then all of a sudden you fall behind. It's too much work to do the post action review, and then that's where the one thing's going to fall through, and you're going to notice it a month later when something bad comes out on the news. Unfortunately, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. That's one reason I love being here is like these problems are hard. They're fun to think about. They're not necessarily the most straightforward to solve, but it's definitely fun.
It is really fun to work on solving them, and I think exactly like we said at the top of what things looked like 6 months ago, what they will look like, we'll probably look back on this conversation and be looking at some more of the solutions, which is exciting to think about. One more question before we wrap up this governance section and then dive a little bit deeper. Um, I'm gonna put you both on the spot that with a question I think a lot of people in this audience are facing. So if a board member asked you tomorrow, what's our plan for governing AI agents? What do you tell them? Where do you start? Kevin, how about you go first?
Sure. I think that um, I'd probably break it down into three commonalities that we need to talk about. First, there's no regulatory checklist today that you can point to as security practitioners and technology practitioners. We like to point to NIST and we like to point to other regulatory frameworks. I think NIST just released their AI agent standards initiative. There's a couple other very newer things out there. I think Gartner's got some predictions out there. I think they said 25% of enterprise breaches will be traced to an AI agent abuse in 2028. So we can't wait to be able to solve this problem. We can't wait for regulatory capabilities to be available because we're going to get breached. Our agents aren't going to operate correctly. So we just need to be honest about where the industry is first and foremost. Second, I think we have to frame risk in the language boards understand, right? And maybe we talk about liability and business continuity, right? Because as we saw from your stats, I think we have 95% of companies, and fix me if my quote is wrong here, have agents operating in production, right? So that's a lot, right? And people are running AI initiatives without any formal approvals, right? And every one of those agents is a potential access path that nobody's governing. If one of those agents exfiltrates customer data or makes an unauthorized change to a production system, the question won't be, did we follow the regulation? Did we do the things we were supposed to do? Did we get our checkbox? Whatever. I think there's ISO 42001 out there, which is really nothing more than, do you have a policy in place to be able to deal with these things? Like, having a policy in place isn't going to protect you, from that capability. Um, you know, I think the question from a board perspective and the question from a security perspective is going to have to be around: did we exercise reasonable care? Reasonable care, board members understand, because that's what we talk about in financial terms, and that's what we talk about, from a SOX perspective, and that's what we talk about, from a generality perspective when we don't have a very specific regulation for these things, right? I think you know, that we really just need to understand which is, how are we mitigating material risk, and we need to make sure that the board understands where we're at, where the industry's at, and what material risk would look like, because this is a conversation that I have with boards a lot, is and with lawyers, is what is material risk? What is the definition of material risk? You have to come up with that definition. You have to come up with that definition and then associate it with AI and our use of AI in our company. Then third is, I think, more the tactical approach, where we need to make sure that we have a internal plan where we're focused on inventory, ownership, continuous governance, right? We need to make sure we focus on those three things. Obviously, inventory being the most important thing. We need to know every agent that we have, what it has access to, and then who is the owner of it, who's responsible for it, right? And I think that ownership overall is going to mean, every agent needs to have a human owner, and we need to make sure that we figure out, how to hold accountability for agents before agents go do stuff, and then you try to figure out, who's responsible for it. And I think, we failed at that with service accounts in the past, and we failed with that with, other non-human identities where they've just been orphaned and existed for a long time. And people get access to things and create issues. Well, let's learn from that mistake and make sure there's nothing orphaned and we've got everything in place. And then from a continuous governance perspective, right? I mean, we just need to enforce policy in real time. We need to figure out how to get there, right? And I think the important thing is, I don't think boards don't want a compliance framework. They need confidence from their security and their technology teams that we have a plan. We understand where the industry's at. We understand how we're using AI in our organization. And we're going to make sure that we continuously, protect our systems and protect our customer data and make sure that we're in a good spot. So I would break it down, boom, 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 kind of in those kind of three big buckets, of just laying it out for a board. That's kind of my thought process on it.
Perfect. Will, is there anything you'd add to that or even do differently?
Yeah, I think I was just gonna joke and be like ditto. Um, but I think in general, I think the biggest question that I think we all are facing is like, what is running and what is there. So, ensuring that there's a plan for visibility into what do you have, because that can lead into that risk discussion on um, how risk adverse do we want to be, how much do we want to lean forward into this, where are we today, where do we want to get to tomorrow, what are our peers or other companies in our industry or tech partners, and how are they treating these things as well. Like Kevin said, we're just now starting to get some regulation bits in place, or I guess start being drafted for circulation. Perhaps there's some industry specific groups and cohorts that you can get together to really start charting a path to get the board confident that, okay, yeah, we do have at least a plan in place to start addressing this. And then of course, kind of like, how are you going to check in on that plan over time to ensure that, okay, yes, we are making the investments in the area that we need to make, um, and whatnot. But so yeah, I think it's, for me, the thing I keep hearing folks talk about is like visibility. How do you even know it's running? Because how do you even put guardrails or govern something that you don't know exists? So the shadow AI, or what they call the dark code, or what, I forget the exact term. It's real, right? So it starts with visibility, and then you can go from there.
That makes sense. So I want to switch gears a little bit. We've spent the past, 10 minutes or so talking about the governance gap, like where it lives, why it's hard, what's at stake. I would really like for us to, oh, we lost Will. That's all right. We'll go with you, Kevin. I'd like for us to talk about um, the MCP layer a little bit, which is kind of like this infrastructure layer that might determine how a lot of this plays out. So, Kevin, you've been vocal about MCP. Let's go there first. I know you wrote that MCP is to AI agents what SAML and OIDC were to human authentication. Can you unpack that a little bit for this audience?
Sure. I was trying to just create a simple way to demonstrate, how Model Context Protocol (MCP) is an integration layer that allows things to happen, right? So I think 20 years ago we came up with SAML. SAML was really designed so that you didn't have to type in lots of usernames and passwords. You have one easy mechanism to prove who you are, and then get access to the application. SAML is usually inside a firewall or inside an organization. OIDC took it to the next level, moved from XML to REST, and helped use Google auth and use all these different auths and bounce between applications, cloud-based applications, and take SAML kind of to the next level, right? But we're really focused on how does a human prove who they are to an application, and access decisions were about that, and I think MCP, is doing something similar, but for AI agents, because when an AI agent needs to read your Salesforce data or write to your database, call an internal API or whatever, MCP is the protocol that just integrates or brokers the connection, right? It defines how an agent will discover what tools are available, and how it authenticates those tools, and what it's authorized to do once connected. But that's where kind of the similarities kind of end, right? And it's just kind of this integration layer that allows your agents to, authenticate and talk to other capabilities instead of a human. But, you know, what makes it, I think, a lot scarier than just, SAML just proving who human is who it is. It just, SAML just mediated, a human, clicking a button once to log into an app, where MCP mediates potentially thousands of tool calls per session, and autonomously. So it just acts on its own and fast, right? As fast as AI can go, that's how fast it goes, which is way faster than a human. Right. So, and there's at that speed, there's not really a possibility to have a human in the loop approving each one. So the idea is, if you can control the MCP layer, then you can start to be able to understand and control what every AI agent in your organization can touch and what it can do. And you know, and if you don't control it, then it's the wild, wild west, right? So I think that's I think it's very, like, you got to really focus in on there. And also, I think, one of the things I said was that, you know, 2006 for cloud security, we're at that inflection point now, except we're going about a million times faster than than how people were using the cloud and how fast people were using SaaS applications. And we don't have a great, we don't have a singular solution for it yet. So that's kind of my thoughts there on the MCP stuff.
That makes sense. Well, I'll pass it to you a kind of question around the challenge. So MCP servers are like multiplying from every direction right now. Internal teams are building them, vendors are shipping them, third party tools are connecting through them. I know you're both talking to companies that are navigating this right now. How do you even get started around that proliferation?
Yeah, I hate to echo what I said before, but I think part of it's like visibility. Like what are the tools that people are needing to connect to? and
Mhm.
then kind of what exists today. So it's almost like an audit and inventory of what's out there. I think part of the problem with MCP is, it was a thing that, some people are still saying it's a thing, some people are saying it's dead, but there's still agents trying to use them. All the AI tools have abilities to connect through them. The problem is that not every company has published their own, or if they publish their own, maybe it's only a subset of what's available. And so you have people writing their own. They may not necessarily be handling things correctly, or it may be very difficult. And so you've got folks trying to go off and compile their own MCP to run an MCP server locally, make it available to their agent. And then I think it's beyond that, I think it's kind of like the patterns and guardrails. If everyone's building their own MCP to connect to some remote system, what's the right one to use? Is there a common way to host that for the company so that you can ensure that everyone is connecting the same way and has the same tooling available? Last thing you want from, even if we don't even think about security, but just enabling your business, is to have only some engineers or employees having access to the best MCP. Right. And so, if Kevin has access to more tool calls in his MCP because he built it out more robust than I did, he would obviously be more effective or move probably much faster than I would be able to. And so you really want to be able to enable that across the business at the same time, while understanding what permissions, what calls are being made, and ensuring that the agents are behaving appropriately, or if it's just you using AI prompting directly, that that you're what you asked for the agent to do is what they actually did, or you can actually achieve the thing. The last thing you want to do is launch Claude, ask a question, and then be like, okay, let me go log into Salesforce because it can't answer the thing I want. Right?
Right. That's a really great transition. Like, we've named the gaps and we've talked about where governance needs to live. And so I want to kind of dive next into the question that I know we've been hearing from our customers and also have had to answer ourselves at C1. Like, how do we move really fast on AI without creating a gap in governance and security that we can't close? Boards everywhere are pushing for adoption. Every board right now is asking, how are we enabling our teams AI? And then the security team is kind of on the back burner. Um, what's your answer for how do I let the business move fast on AI without creating a governance gap I can't close? Kevin, how about you take this one?
Um, how do I let the business move fast? You know, it's a great question, and it's a question everybody should be asking, right? And I think that you don't solve it by being faster at saying no. You solve it by figuring out how to make the safe path the fast path, right? I think that is what becomes very important, and I think some of our data. I'm going to quote some of it, so you have to tell me if I'm wrong. But I think we had 95% of organizations already have agents performing autonomous tasks in our future of identity report. Um, you know, if your organization strategy requires a human to manually review every action or approve every access request, like you're gonna like you just slowed everything down even slower than it was. Right. So you have a choice. You can become the bottleneck. Everyone figures out how to get around. Or you build all these things in and people just rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp, and you get governance theater. Right. So I think you have to figure out, how can you move at the speed of AI with AI and provide that fast path, right? Right, and I think it's some form of policy based enforcement, right, where you define the rules, what type of access, under what conditions, for how long, and what level of human oversight is needed based on the user and the system that needs to access. And it needs to be a continuous process, not something that is done on a quarterly access review capability, because that's just not gonna work, right? For the business, it's not gonna help them go faster, and it's gonna probably get you fired as a security professional. So let's not get fired. Let's help the business uh, go fast because they can self provision within the policy that's been defined. And security can get the visibility, they can get the governance, they can get the auditability, as they see everything kind of flowing through. Right. So I think that, we have to figure that out. We have to, you know, figure out how to solve this issue, by, making that, uh, making the fast path the easy path, right? And I think that's the solution everybody should be looking for. And as a security person, it's a really great feeling if people don't say, "Oh crap, security's coming," and they're going to tell me no. Like, "Oh gosh, here security's coming," and they want to get me access to stuff quicker. Like that's a much better feeling.
Definitely.
I was
Well,
just going to say,
yeah, if it
let's
makes
not
you
kid ourselves that we know every tool call or everything that the business is going to need, right? And so we should be proactively partnering and engaging with every org at the business to enable them. And I think, like you said, they're going to be much more open to you coming to them and saying, "Hey, let's work together on how we can enable you to do this," and less likely to go around you if they think and see that you're working with them and helping them, right? It might still take you a little while to get just to the point where they need it. But if they see that you're actively working and wanting to engage with them, like, I mean, it goes forever, right? Such a long way. And then I think that mitigates a bunch of the risk of the shadow AI and a bunch of the other things. But like you could come to me today and say, "Hey, we need to enable Salesforce MCP. Go build the policies for it." I'd be like, "Hey, Stacy, let's go build these together because I, I'm not the expert in Salesforce. You are. Let's figure out what are the profiles that are actually needed in order to enable folks to use agents, or the agent to run off and do the thing, or for folks to use AI to do their work successfully. Otherwise, it's going to be this frictionful thing. If security only gave me this thing, it doesn't really work, so I'm going to do it myself anyway." So I highly stress partner with your business to be successful.
absolutely. Well, I was just gonna say, don't worry, I never get scared when I see you coming.
Oh, perfect. I appreciate that.
All right, well, I just wanna have ask one more question before we wrap the conversation for Q&A. Just a really quick one for both of you. If someone in this audience goes back to their desk after the session or tells their team something after this session, what would you want it to be? Like, what is the high impact thing that they can do right now?
Let me start. Um, I'd say, like, I gave a talk the other day, and I asked a crowd of people, where does your organization fall on like a level of a 5 level maturity level, right? And I asked, you don't know, do you know, like, what agents? Like, do you know if there's agents running your environment at all? Do you know how many? Do you have any idea whatsoever? Then you'd be at a one. Two, we know, but we inventoried one time a year ago, but we don't really know what's there today. So are you a two? Three, we wrote our policies, but we've got nothing in place to actually manage them, right? Or four, you get into a spot where you've got real time governments, and five is obviously utopia from a unified governance perspective. So, you know, I would say from this talk, think about those 5 levels, and if you don't know what's running in your environment, go figure it out. We'll give a great example. Like, you don't need tools to go figure it out. Go work with your business leaders and business partners. Figure out what tools they're using, what tools they want to use, and then start that inventory and start building that relationship to help make the business effective so you can put the right guardrails in place, right? Obviously, if you don't have any formal governance, come up with one. And then from a policies perspective, make sure you have something written down, right? Everybody needs something. And then, this is a mission, right? Or this is a journey. And just have a good plan for your journey, right? Starts with visibility, and it's gotta be, it might be a one-time visibility, but then how do you get it continuous, right? Like, this is a journey. There's no magical solution to utopia here. So, start with the visibility aspect of it, and kind of work your way down the maturity track.
I was just gonna say, go ask your, go query your teammates or your peers, and ask them a question. Do we know what's running, or how many agents or how many MCP servers do you think we talk to on a given day? Because I think that will help spark the question and conversation with folks, but also give you a good realization of how well do we actually understand our environment, especially if you find someone that actually knows what's happening. You might get some learnings there, but I think you'll probably realize that no one has a clue. Uh, and I would say if you're, especially if you're tasked with solving security for AI and you haven't used it yourself, go spend time, play with it, understand it. It's going to be very hard for you to put together a strategy that's cohesive that will enable the business without you actually understanding it. And I think once again, besides just AI, go talk to your business and see how they work and how they're going to use it.
Love that. All right, well, we're almost at time. I did want to check and see if anyone in the chat had any questions, but I don't think I saw any come through. So I did just want to thank you both for the conversation and thank you to everyone who joined us today. If anything from this conversation sparked a question that you didn't get to ask, feel free to reach out to us directly. I think, like both Kevin and Will have said, we're all trying to figure this out together. It is the Wild West out there. So reach out to us directly. We're happy to help. We're happy to talk and problem solve through this crazy AI world. We will send out the recording and a few resources to everyone's inbox later today. And if the compliance side of this is next on your list, Will is doing a follow up session on May 13th with Bar Advisory on audit proofing your AI implementation. And we'll drop that link in the follow up email as well. So thank you everyone for spending your afternoon with us. Thank you, Kevin and Will, for your time. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their week.